The void was absolute. Beyond the reinforced viewports of United Earth vessel Icarus, nothing but the inky blackness of interstellar space stretched out, punctuated by distant pinpricks of starlight. Captain Elara Mendez stood alone at the command deck's panoramic window, her breath fogging the glass ever so slightly. She traced the arcs of cosmic dust illuminated by the glow of a distant nebula, an ethereal tapestry that filled her with both awe and an acute sense of isolation. Behind her hummed the quiet symphony of the ships, life support, coolant pumps, cycling, the soft whoosh of recycled air, and the rhythmic pulsing of fusion reactors. Every system was running at peak efficiency save one, the morale of her crew. "Captain, power reserves are holding steady at 92%, reported Lieutenant Yansho from the diagnostics console. His fingers danced across holodisplay controls, bringing up graphs of energy fluctuations. Even through closed channels, she could sense the subtle tremor in his voice. "Could be worse," Elara replied, not turning away from the viewport. "How long until we hit the Arvidon cluster's core?" "Approximately 4 standard hours," Sho answered. "Signal from Earth confirmed. Protocol dictates we wait for local Moravan authorities before proceeding further." Elara closed her eyes for a fraction of a second. "And if they never come?" Chow's jaw tightened. "Then we proceed without their blessing." A faint warning chime broke the moment. The communications console flickered to life, displaying a blinking red icon. Unacknowledged hail attempt. The room fell silent. ELAR across to the terminal. She initiated an automatic loop that would broadcast her message on every frequency band the Icarus could muster. The rich, layered tones of the nearly 70 languages of Earth echoed faintly through the com speakers. "This is Captain Elara Mendez of the United Earth vessel Icarus. We come in peace and seek open dialogue. We request permission for safe passage through Moravan space. Please respond." 20 minutes passed. The glow of the nearby nebula shifted as it rotated beyond their windows. Pipes groaned gently under the subtle stress of temperature variation. In the command deck's low lighting, faces of crew members, some fresh out of training, others veterans of the Mars Titan cargo runs reflected impatience, hope, and a growing anxiety. At last, the console hissed. A single line of text appeared on screen, but it was not the crisp, polite English she had sent. Instead, symbols danced in a complex pattern, an unfamiliar Moravan glyph. Lieutenant Sho frowned. "I don't recognize this encoding," he murmured. "Our translators can't parse it." Elara inhaled slowly. "Perhaps it's a test." "Doctor." Soren Halleck, the ship's xenobiologist, approached with his tablet. "Maybe a rudimentary challenge response protocol. They've been monitoring, but they might not be ready for true voice exchange." His eyes gleamed with excitement. "Let me try rerouting it through the biopattern decoders." As Dr. Halleck worked, the Icarus drifted deeper into the cluster, quilting its path between glowing filaments of gas and drifting meteoritic fragments. Outside, cresting storms of ionized particles painted fleeting patterns across the hull, a silent display of cosmic fireflies. 30 more minutes crawled by. Then, an answer emerged. The console blinked and translated. "Stray vessel unrecognized. Identify your cargo and purpose of transit. Failure to comply will result in denial of passage." Elara's shoulders relaxed slightly. At least it was a response. She keyed her reply. "We are explorers, scientists, and diplomats of the Unified Earth Coalition. Our cargo: medical supplies for frontier colonies, scientific instruments to study nebular phenomena. We seek only to learn and to share knowledge." She hesitated before sending, adding one final line. "We request safe harbor at the nearest Moravan station for resupply and diplomatic courtesy." The seconds ticked by. On the viewport, a colossal structure began to take form. the Moravan orbital relay, a ring-shaped station that floated like a halo around the gas giant's faint silhouette. Its surface was a lattice of crystalline spires and reflective panels, both art and function interwoven. The station's scale was staggering. Neurons of light pulsed across its girders, churning with the lifeblood of a civilization that had existed for millennia. No response. The Icarus drifted forward, its engines shifting to low-thrust maneuvering mode. A faint vibration transmitted through the deck plates as automatic docking clamps on the relay awoke, preparing for potential compliance or rejection. In the engineering bay, Engineer Malik Donrai's voice crackled over the comnet. "Captain, we've detected anomalies in secondary coolant loops, temperatures spiking in Section 3. On the display behind him, a thermal scan revealed hotspots around the auxiliary reactors. "On it," Alara replied. She rose from the command chair. "I'm heading to engineering." She passed through narrow corridors lined with gleaming maintenance ports. Crew members moved with purpose. Astrochemists checking sensor readings, Navtechs recalibrating long range, scanners and medics preparing emergency triage stations, just in case. Ilara's boots clicked against the alloy floor as she reached the circular hatch to the engineering section. Inside, sparking conduits and exposed circuitry bathed the compartment in a flickering orange glow. Engineers worked feverishly, welding patch modules and rerouting coolant lines. Malik wiped sweat from his brow. "Captain, we're diverting 20% of main coolant to stabilize the core, but life support may be impacted," he warned. "Alara," called another voice, Petty Officer Juno Fisk, standing guard by a sealed access ladder. External scanners just flagged multiple vessels emerging from nebula cover heading our way. Ilara's heart rate quickened. On the holodisplay, sleek silhouettes of Moravan patrol ships materialized, their engines radiant with high-efficiency graviton drives. They closed the distance in minutes. "Are they weapons-armed?" she asked. "Scanners suggest standard patrol configuration. No heightened combat readiness. Yet." "Alara," Malik said, "we can't hold coolant diverts much longer. Systems are on the verge of shutting down." She turned to Fisk. "Open a secure channel to the lead patrol." Fisk's fingers flew. In moments, the patrol's insignia appeared on a floating screen. A single Moravan officer in austere silver-blue uniform filled the viewport, a tall figure with elongated features and crystalline tattoos that shimmered under station light. "This is Captain Alara Mendez of the United Earth vessel Icarus," Alara began, voice steady. "Our systems are failing. We request docking clearance and emergency resupply." The Moravan's eyes, an impossible shade of lilac, studied her. After a pregnant pause, the officer spoke in accented common. "Your request is noted. We will transmit docking protocols. Prepare for initial quarantine procedures. Failure to comply will be met with force." Alara allowed herself the faintest smile. "Understood. We will comply." Fisk exhaled. "Protocols incoming." As the Icarus cycled its external grids to quarantine mode and angled itself toward the regolith-dotted docking arms of the relay, Alara took a moment to breathe. The crew's anxious glances softened into relief. The cold indifference of the Moravans had thawed, if only slightly. Still, as the engines hummed and the docking clamps reached out like mechanical fingers, Alara knew this was but the beginning. In the silent arrival of her vessel, she had sparked an ember of curiosity in observers who had long treated humanity as a cosmic afterthought. Now that the Moravans had spoken, the true test would begin, balancing pride, survival, and the fragile hope of peaceful first contact. The docking clamps on the Moravan orbital relay sealed around the Icarus in a measured rhythm, metal fingers tightening with mechanical precision. Inside the quarantine airlocks, the hiss of pressurized seals echoed through the corridors like A warning. Captain Ilara Mendez watched from the command deck as hazy turquoise mist and antimicrobial fumigation poured out along the gangway, consuming every surface in an antiseptic haze. Beyond the viewport, the crystalline spires of the relay glinted coldly, indifferent sentinels to her crew's plight. Airlock secure, reported Lieutenant Shaw, voice tense. Pressure differential at 15%. Quarantine protocols active. We'll have full environmental control back in 30 minutes. Ilara nodded, though she felt no relief. Excellent. Prepare docking clamps for full transfer once they release quarantine. I want an open channel to the station's docking master. On it, Shaw replied, flicking switches. But no response yet. It's like they've gone silent again. On the deck below, the crew braced themselves for an awaited but uneasy welcome. Engineer Malik Donrai stayed behind in engineering to finish rerouting the final coolant loops, his gaunt face lit by the glow of coolant conduits. Dr. Soren Halleck and MedTech Mira Owusu waited by the infirmary doors, scanning hazmat carts, stacked high with disinfectant coils and bioscanner wands. None of them speaking felt premature until the quarantine lifted at last. The corridor doors whooshed open. The contamination mist receded, sucked back by reverse fans in the sealed filters. A sharp intake of fresh, star-cooled air swept through. Ilara touched her mask's release clip hesitantly, then removed it, allowing the sigh of recycled atmosphere to fill her lungs. Docking clamps disengaging, Shaw announced. We're clear. Ilara gave a curt nod. Move out. She led the way, walking briskly down the central passageway. Crew members fell in line behind her, their boots clacking against the floor plates. They passed through the docking tunnel, lights gradually shifting from harsh white to a soft sapphire glow. Finally, they arrived at the base of the relays. Docking arm station technicians, humanoid, but with pallid, semi-translucent skin, stood waiting. They held slender tool pistols that recalibrated magnetic locks with soft pulses of energy. Their uniforms were pristine, white-gray suits etched with patterns reminiscent of neural circuitry. They offered no smiles, only nods of acknowledgement. Captain Mendez, spoke the lead technician in a voice like wind over ice. I am Laya Kor, docking liaison. Welcome to Morven Orbital Relay. Please follow protocol procedures. She tapped a slender wrist console, initiating a series of holographic forms that shimmered between them. Biometric scans, cargo manifests, environmental readouts. Ilara inclined her head. Thank you, Laya Kor. We're prepared to comply. She gestured to her crew. Medical bay first, then cargo hold. We'll need access to our own science lockers afterward. Layaker's eyes flickered, an almost imperceptible sign of surprise. Understood. However, you must remain within designated zones until full decontamination clearance. With a barely perceptible gesture, another pair of technicians ushered the humans into narrow, glowing corridors marked Zone A. The path wound through a lattice of crystalline corridors, veined with luminescent filaments that pulsed gently like the heartbeat of the station itself. Every surface reflected the soft light, creating an otherworldly kaleidoscope. Systems hissed quietly in the walls. Tiny vents exhaled cool drafts. It all felt antiseptic, immaculate, and utterly devoid of warmth. In the medical wing, Dr. Halleck and MedTech Owusu set up portable biocontainment scanners. As they methodically swept the crew for pathogens, both human and unknown, observed the Morven instruments with fascination. Their scanners could detect molecular-level impurities, viral fragments, even minute traces of exotic xenobiology. Yet the Morvens themselves kept a strict distance, standing just beyond the sanitization barriers. Captain, Dr. Halleck said, voice low but urgent. The readings are clean. No foreign pathogens detected. were cleared on the biological front. Alara allowed herself a small nod. Excellent. Relay them to Liacor. Moments later, Liacor's voice crackled over the COM console. Quarantine lifted. You may proceed to the cargo corridors. The clipped formalities felt like oil poured over creaking gears, functional but frigid dot in the cargo bay. The human crew unlocked their storage compartments. Crates marked Med Frontier and Cenebula slid open, revealing rows of medical aerosols, surgical drones, microlabs, and sensor probes. Alara guided the Moravan handlers through the manifest, explaining each item's purpose. Buccal scanners for frontier outposts, nanofiber sutures that could seal complex wounds, gravitic spectrometers for nebula particle analysis. Liacor examined each item with cool efficiency. After scanning the manifest, she said, "These are authorized. However, offloading will proceed at our schedule. You will report to the science bay in one standard cycle." One cycle of full Earth day felt like an eternity to the Icarus crew, yet they complied. Protesting would only deepen the Moravan's indifference. As they withdrew, Captain Mendez stayed behind, studying Liacor's crystalline tattoos and expressionless features. "Tell me, Liacor," Alara ventured, "why the quarantine and formality? Why treat us as potential threats when we've made every effort to communicate?" Liacor paused, the crystalline filigree at her temples glowing slightly brighter. "We have observed humans for generations through automated probes. You possess volatile technologies, chemical, biological, gravitational that, if mismanaged, could harm entire star systems." She tapped the datapad. "Better safe than sorry." Alara's shoulders sagged with the weight of that truth. "Understood. But how do we become more than variables in a risk matrix?" "We seek partnership, knowledge exchange." Liacor angled her head. "Partnership must be earned. The Moravan sovereignty has rarely granted it. Your actions today will determine whether we grant you entry to deeper dialogues or relegate you to history's footnotes." Their standoff was silent, yet charged with promise and threat alike. Alara recognized the challenge. To break through the Moravan's icy reserve, she needed not just technology, but trust. As the Icarus crew retreated to their vessel for the night cycle, the station's lights dimmed in a programmed astronomy sequence, revealing the gas giant's swirling bands and faint yellow rings beyond the viewport. The sight reminded Alara why she had volunteered for this mission, not for victory, not for conquest, but for the chance to stand on the threshold of the unknown dot in that fragile quiet. Her resolve crystallized. They would survive. They would learn. And finally, they would prove that humanity was not a fleeting spark in the void, but a flame that could illuminate even the darkest corners of the universe, if only given the chance. The corridors of the Icarus felt narrower now, as if the hull itself had begun to tighten around them. The ship's silver skin, once bright and hopeful beneath the cluster's starlight, had dulled into a matte gray under the relentless recycling of emergency power. Every system life support, environmental control, gravimetric stabilizers pinged in warning, begging for reprieve. Captain Alara Mendez moved among her crew like a calm eye in a brewing storm, her steps measured, her eyes sharp. In the briefing room, the senior officers clustered around a flickering hologram of the nearby Moravan battle group. The three patrol frigates, once blurred whispers on distant scanners, now loomed dangerously close. Their triangular prows pointed toward the Icarus as if marking prey. Energy signatures pulsed in alternation surveillance mode, lock and target mode. Though no weapons fire had yet been unleashed, Alara swept her gaze over the faces illuminated by cobalt glow. Lieutenant Chow's jaw was clenched. Dr. Halleck rubbed at his temple with a white-knuckled grip on his datapad. Navigator Park sat with her hands folded, jaw tight. And Engineer Malik Donray tapped his pen against the datapad screen showing Rising reactor core temperatures. We're 14 hours from critical failure, Malik reported. If we divert any more power to environmental systems, we'll lose propulsion integrity. And without thrust, we're adrift in their tactical crosshairs. Show pointed at the hologram. Those patrols will coordinate an orbital blockade. In less than 10 hours. They'll starve us out or worse. Decide we're a threat and open fire first. Alara nodded. Options? The room fell silent. Each officer felt the weight of the dilemma, to strain the thin thread of their dwindling. Resources against a sovereign power, indifferent to their plight. Or to concede and risk being interned indefinitely, possibly, never to return home. Dr. Halleck broke the hush. We still possess 20 experimental gravitic sensor pods. If we could launch them toward the relay, we might elicit a response, force them to engage our signals rather than ignore us. He tapped the table. It's subtle sub-threshold emissions that only our pod receivers can detect. The Morvans will notice an unauthorized gravitic signature in their airspace. They'll have to investigate. How long to prepare? Alara asked. 6 hours minimum, Malik replied. But that means shutting down half our life support loops for the assembly. A murmur of discontent rose. Show interjected. If we do that, our CO scrubbers will lose efficiency. We'll be breathing recycled air with increased toxicity. Some of us will be incapacitated. Navigator Park raised her hand. Slender fingers curled as if clutching. A star. Or, she said softly, we build a relay beacon of our own. Broadcast a distress code at frequencies they cannot ignore, quantum encrypted, high-energy pulses. That could force an immediate response. Quantum encryption requires stable cooling, Malik countered. We don't have the margin. Park's dark eyes glittered. We have the quantum com array in the science bay. It draws minimal power, just needs pulse bursts. If we time it right. Alara listened, thrilled by the spark of ingenuity. Yet deep inside, she knew the Moravan's indifference was not technical, but cultural. They simply didn't regard humanity as worthy of notice. No subterfuge would force real engagement. The only language they respected was power. She tapped a console and brought up her own private calculations. The ship's missile complement, 6 miniaturized gravitic warheads welded to fusion cells, were still armed. If even one reached a frigate's shields, it would shatter the crystalline armor of a Moravan hull. She glanced around. What if we combine approaches? She proposed. We deploy Park's beacon and simultaneously launch a single sensor pod to distract them. That will draw their frigates closer. Then, if they continue to ignore us, we stage a threat posture fire. A missile off their bow. Not to destroy, but to show we won't be overlooked. A cold hush fell. Malik's usual calm voice rasped, as direct escalation. If they realize we're serious, they will retaliate with full force. Show leaned forward, palms splayed on the table. But if we do nothing, we all die out here or languish indefinitely. Better to risk a short, sharp shock than a slow suffocation. The officers exchanged glances. Park swallowed. I can have the quantum beacon ready in half the time, 3 hours, if I divert power from non-essential scientific instruments. It's risky, but doable. Dr. Halleck tapped his datapad. I'll coordinate with Malik on cooling prioritization. Life support will run at 70% efficiency, enough to maintain consciousness in healthy crew, but marginal for others. Alara inhaled deeply, letting their words settle like iron filings aligning in a magnetic field. Then it's decided. We prepare the beacon, ready one sensor pod, and keep our missile bay primed. If, after beacon deployment and sensor launch, they still treat us as ghosts, we demonstrate our resolve. Show exhaled. I'll notify the crew, everyone to stations for limited life support protocol. Decks A through F will cycle environmental shutdowns in 2-hour shifts. Malik inclined his head. Engineering will reroute accordingly. But we need 2 extra hours to shore up the reactor's heat sinks. Park locked eyes with Alara. I'll have the beacon's emission profile ready in 90 minutes. We should run a test now, before we're at full blockade. Alara tapped her cum badge. All hands, prepare for emergency power reconfiguration. Stations at alert status. And Lieutenant Cho keep trying the Morven channels. Someone, get me that. Liaison's personal frequency. I want one last plea before we light the fuse. Chow's fingers trembled as he keyed in channels. On the display, the Morven blockade ships drifted into standoff positions, their ion drives humming with lethal promise. Outside, the silent nebula glowed like a bruised wound in the darkness. Meanwhile, in the science bay, Park and Halleck worked under flickering lights. The quantum array's crystalline matrices shimmered as Park aligned subatomic resonance emitters. Each pulse would encode humanity's universal request. We are here. We do not intend harm. But we will not be silenced. She calibrated the power regulators, her breath caught between excitement and fear. In engineering, Malik oversaw the final coolant reroutes. Hoses hissed and spit steam as they carried thermal loads away from the fusion core. Sparks flared where a pressure clamp failed, and he yanked out his multi-tool to weld a new fitting. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but he refused to slow down. Captain Mendez retreated to the command deck, where Xiao's console blinked with silence. Still nothing, he murmured. Elara drew a steadying breath. Contact their liaison. Send this message. Captain Mendez again. We will not ask twice. Your indifference endangers us all. Show respect for life. Then shut the cum lines. Let them consider it. Show nodded. His finger hovered over the upload control. He hesitated, then pressed. The message spiraled across quantum channels, vanishing from human sight into Morven. Data streams. Moments passed. The command deck lights dimmed as the ship powered down non-essentials. Life support vents quieted to a whisper. Only the hum of the reactors and the faint electric hiss of the blockade ships remained. Suddenly, alarms blared across the Icarus. The quantum beacon was live. Park's voice crackled over the cum. Beacon on frequency. Emissions stabilizing. In 5, 4, 3. Outside, the hull vibrated as the first pulse rippled through space. On the holo display, the silhouette of the nearest frigate flickered, its shields flickering with anomalous resonances. Twice, thrice, Park's pulses flared. Then the blockade ships paused, their formation shifting. The Morvens were reacting. Alara's heart thundered. Launch the sensor pod, she ordered. Show hit the release. A small, dart-like probe shot into the void. Its gravitic thrusters glowed briefly before it wheeled toward the lead frigate, trailing a spine of shimmering subspace turbulence. All eyes were fixed on the patrol's response. Would the Morvens hail them? Would they open fire? Or would they simply look away again? In the hush that followed, every breath aboard the Icarus carried the weight of humanity's fate. The gauntlet was thrown, the dice cast. Now, they waited to see whether their desperate gambit would awaken a cosmic giant or unleash its wrath. The Icarus trembled under the strain of its own engines and the pulsing quantum beacon. Captain Alara Mendez stood in the command chair, eyes locked on 3 holographic readouts: the blockade frigate's positions, the sensor pod's trajectory, and the missile bay status. All around her, the bridge crew braced as life support vents whined and console lights flickered with the ebbing power reserves. Beacon emissions stable, reported Navigator Rhea Park, her voice taut. Frigate Alpha is diverting course approaching on intercept vector. Their shields have locked onto our probe's gravitic signature. Good, Alara replied. though her hands curled into fists on the armrests. Show. Status on com. Channels? Lieutenant Chow's fingers hovered over the frequency array. They're scanning for our signature now. Pings are reflected encrypted echoes only they can decipher. No hail yet, but they're aware of us. He paused. They've raised shield frequencies. Standard defense posture. Weapons still offline, but preparing. Across the ship, Engineer Malik Donrai barked orders into his comlink. Life support is at 60%. Thermal recalibrations are holding at threshold. We've rerouted coolant from non-critical systems. We'll buy another hour. The transmission crackled with static, his voice raw fatigue. Elara nodded to herself. 1 hour. That was the window. Beyond it, the ship would grind to a halt, drifting like cosmic debris. If the Moravans chose to open fire, the Icarus would be a sitting target. She keyed her cum badge. All hands, this is it. Stations at alert. If we're thrown off station, fall back to manual thrusters and brace for impact protocols. She cleared her throat. And weapons crew, ready the missile bay. We fire one clean warning shot off the bow of Alpha. Nothing more unless they respond with hostility. Understood, Captain. Came the chorus of voices, sensor officers, weapons technicians, and the 2 missile gunners in the launch bay, their visors down and gauntlets clenched on control sticks. Seconds stretched into an agony of anticipation. On the main viewer, the blockade frigates glided in silent formation, triangular hulls bristling with crystalline arrays. Their silver-blue surfaces gleamed under the nebula's ghostly light. For a moment, they seemed statues, cold, unfeeling. Then, one by one, the frigate's gravitic emitters hummed, focusing a pale blue beam at the drifting sensor pod. The probe shuddered and fragmented into glowing motes, which dissolved into the void. Park's voice trembled. Sensor pod neutralized. They know we're here. No response yet. Elara drew in a slow breath. That's our cue. She tapped. The launch sequence. On the halotable, 6 missile bays blinked in yellow readiness. She yawned Bay 1. A soft clank echoed through the deck plates as the door slid open. The missile gleamed in its cradle, a sleek, cone-tipped fusion gravitic. Warhead, no larger than a child's outstretched arm. Bay 1 armed, Weapons Officer Lieutenant Ramirez confirmed. Elara pressed the hostile contact override. Target lock on Frigate Alpha's bow. Offset vector 2 degrees starboard. Prepare to fire on my mark. Locked, Ramirez said, his voice like a held breath. The bridge lights dimmed as the Icarus siphoned the last reserves into the firing circuits. A low hum pervaded the room, an electric heartbeat counting down to the moment of truth. Mark, Elara said. A thunderous vibration rattled the Icarus as the missile launched, igniting a plume of iridescent plasma that lanced through the docking bay and into space. The aft viewport framed the streak of fire, a comet born of desperation. Missile. Away, Ramirez reported. The bridge crew exhaled as one, their shoulders slackening. Even the blockade frigates seemed to pause, as if startled by the sudden intrusion of violence. In the void, the missile arced gracefully toward Frigate Alpha, its gyroscopic stabilizers adjusting to compensate for relative drift. In the command deck of the Moravan flagship Erdal's Pride, Admiral Kiam stood before his own panoramic viewport, flanked by tactical officers. They watched the human weapons slip through their blockade lines like a jagged comet. Kiam's crystalline tattoos flared with irritation. Shields up, he intoned. Weapons stand by. If that missile breaches our armor, destroy the vessel immediately. Back on the Icarus, the crew watched the tactical display. The missile had reached 20% of its intercept vector when Frigate Alpha's shields flared a dome of prismatic energy that first deflected, then absorbed the impact. The explosion bloomed against the shield's surface, a kaleidoscopic detonation that rippled like a dead star. "Impact confirmed," reported Park. "Shield integrity at 85%. Alara allowed herself a fleeting nod of satisfaction. The warning had been delivered, one meteor-like strike against the hull. Now came the moment of decision. Would the Moravans escalate, or would they finally speak? Status on their response. She ordered. Lieutenant Cho scrolled through incoming data. Shield arrays recharging. No weapons discharge. And this is unexpected. They're broadcasting a secure channel, addressed directly to our CIC frequency. Open it. Alara's voice was steady, but the tremor beneath was unmistakable. The holo display flickered. A tall Moravan officer, Lyakor Superior, this time filled the viewport. His crystalline tattoos glowed an urgent violet under the station lights. He spoke in accented common, each word measured. "Human vessel Icarus, this is Admiral Kiam of the Moravan Sovereignty. Your actions constitute an act of aggression, yet your vessel remains intact. We request immediate stand-down of all weapon systems and preparation for boarding. You will accompany a Moravan envoy to the relay's conference chamber for negotiation. Failure to comply will result in termination." Alara exhaled, relief and tension warring in her chest. She keyed her reply. "Admiral Kiam, this is Captain Alara Mendez. We stand down our weapons. We will comply with boarding procedures once. You grant medical assistance, repairs, and diplomatic recognition of our vessel sovereignty. We come in peace and with an open mind toward mutual understanding." Silence stretched as the hologram wavered. Then, Kiam inclined his head. "Agreed. Prepare for boarding within 15 minutes. Medical teams will dock to your ship's starboard airlock. Engineers will follow. The more productive our dialogue, the more lenient the sovereignty's terms." Alara allowed herself a weary smile. "Understood. I'll have my crew ready." She turned to her officers. "We did it. They finally saw us." She paused. "But this is only the beginning. Get the ship stabilized. Dr. Halleck, coordinate with their medical team for triage. Malik, you have permission to take onboard engineers. Focus on the coolant loops. Shell, open the comm channels. And Park, prepare all diplomatic logs and translate everything." "Aye, Captain," they chorused. 15 minutes later, the Icarus's starboard airlock cycled open. Pale glows of Moravan bioware flooded the corridor as medical teams moved in, carrying triage packs, nanon-injectors, and molecular filters. Their leader, Surgeon General Al Rin, offered no smile but a professional nod as she swept her scanner. Wand across the human patients. "Captain Mendez?" She intoned through the translation filter. "You have her," Alara smiled faintly. "Thank you. Please prioritize our respiratory systems." Auron inclined her head. "We will begin immediately. You have my word." Behind her, Moravan engineers, tall, precise, and strangely graceful, entered engineering alongside Malik, their crystalline tools sparking as they integrated new coolant regulators. Meanwhile, Lyakor and Admiral Kiam's envoy arrived in the command deck, escorted by Sho. Kiam's violet gaze swept over the battered consoles and the weary crew. "You have proven your resolve." That was a creditable display of tactical acumen, he admitted. "But let us talk of cooperation." Now, he gestured to the hollow table, where the nebulous fractal spirals danced in ghostly blues. Alara steeled herself and sat. Beside her, Park fed live translation data, while Dr. Halleck handed out synthesized Moravan refreshments, crystalline pods of protein gel. The tension in the room was palpable. Centuries of Moravan superiority and human isolation converging in a single fragile moment. In the silence that followed, Kiam leaned forward. Why did you fire upon us, Captain? You could have awaited our aid. Alara met his gaze. We tried. We broadcasted every frequency, from low-energy beacons to quantum pulses. Your patrol scanned and refused to acknowledge us. You treated our vessel as entropy something, to be left to decay. We reached for dialogue, and were met with oblivion. He regarded her, inscrutable. In our history, unknown vessels pose the greatest risk. Your culture's volatility, nuclear fission, genetic engineering, planetary warfare, these are nightmares for us. We could not risk exposure without demonstration of your seriousness. Then you understand now, she pressed. We are serious, not only about our survival, but about peaceful exchange. We wish to share data, to form alliances, to learn your ways and offer our own. If we had waited until the end, there would be no one left to talk. Kiem's violet eyes softened fractionally. Perhaps we misjudged. Perhaps you are an anomaly worthy of reconsideration. He inclined his head toward Liacor. Maintain medical oversight. Restore the Icarus to flight readiness. We shall convene a diplomatic session at the Relay's council chamber in 24 hours. Alara allowed herself a genuine smile. I look forward to it, Admiral. As the Marvin officers departed, Liacor lingered. Her crystalline filigree shimmered with what almost seemed like curiosity. Captain Mendez, she said quietly, you have awakened our interest. Let us hope your people are as steadfast as you. Alara extended her hand. We'll prove it to you, one step at a time. Beyond the viewport, the blockade frigates slid back into patrol formation, their bow thrusters glowing softly as they resumed silent vigil. Inside, the Icarus's corridors hummed with renewed purpose. Engineers and medics working side by side, xenobiologists comparing nebular data, navtechs mapping new star lanes, and crew members finally breathing easier under stabilized life. Support dot in the quiet aftermath, Alara returned to the command chair. She allowed herself a moment to reflect on the gauntlet they had run, the threat of suffocation, the cold indifference of an ancient power, the desperate gambit that had torn. The silence. Ahead lay unknown perils of diplomacy, but also the promise of alliance, of knowledge, and of a place for humanity in the Arvidon cluster. With the hiss of restored air ducts and the gentle pulse of renewed reactor hum, the Icarus prepared for its next voyage, not as a drifting ghost, but as a herald of human will stronger than any silence, fiercer than any void, and ready to meet the future head-on.